Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now in the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethea. And you know, if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan for this show, if there's power in numbers, the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African American solar installation design firms to address the high energy costs at our historically black colleges and universities. Ladies and gentlemen, we're introducing our new intro music for the show, which is Mr. Magic by Grover Washington. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the airways of Solar Now in the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And then that's one of our new introduction. That's one of our intro songs to our show here on the Positive Change Purchasing digital podcast TV radio network. And we are streaming over Facebook, Twitter, the link, and several of platforms. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American renewable energy companies to address the higher energy costs at our historically black colleges and universities, to utilize black owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also, to educate the Black community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now in the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Also, ladies and gentlemen, if you join us every week, you know that this show is brought to you also by the Black Sports Legends HBCU Solar Radio Talk Show Initiative, and you can get more information on that initiative by logging on to our website at positivechangepc.com. That's positivechangepc.com. Also, ladies and gentlemen, this show is brought to you every week by the National Association of Blacks in Solar. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a scheduled guest today, but we have a very interesting topic, and we've captioned this our show today as the look, looking at the road for renewable energy is a very rocky road for middle class white Americans. For communities of color, there's no road of relief at all based on the energy hikes that we see that are coming forth through the Trump administration. Now, we're going to drill down on that subject matter, ladies and gentlemen, and tell you exactly what we mean when we're talking about these issues. So we've lined up a number of articles today, and we're going to be discussing and looking at what's taking place right in the marketplace. There was a very, very interesting article, ladies and gentlemen, that has appeared. Trump's energy price hikes, families could pay $120 more for electricity annually if the GOP pulls the plug on clean energy. Now, this was an article that appeared in Evergreen Energy, and it was a press release that's just been put out. A very, very interesting uh, release, ladies and gentlemen, that we are going to share with you today here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to sort of jump right on into that specific article that we're talking about here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. We are still working on trying to be able to do a number of things at one time here on our platform here at Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Now, this is a press release that was put out by a very, very by the Evergreen Action Group, which puts out an online information blog, which I find to be very, very informative. Today, a new analysis from the Energy Innovation revealed that residential electricity prices could jump 6.7% in 1920 by 1926 if Republicans charge ahead with their reckless, unpopular plan to pull the plug on the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, many of you, ladies and gentlemen, have heard me talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act was one of the first things that President Biden did when he came to office. He signed Executive Order 14096. 14096 gave rise to the Invest in America agenda, which you had the Build Back Better, where you had over 66,000 construction projects, but it also pumped in terms of no interest loans and grants and tax credits $1.7 trillion into the U.S. economy through the Inflation Reduction Act to address a number of issues. The other executive order, which he signed at the time President Biden signed Executive Order 1406, was 13985. 13985 created equity, diversity, and inclusion across all 6 federal agencies. And it had an initiative called the Justice 40 Initiative that directed 40% of that investment must be targeted to low and moderate income communities across America. Also, you had Executive Order 14008, which dealt with EJ communities under EPA, environmental justice to combat climate change here in the U.S. as well as abroad. Now, looking at the Inflation Reduction Act, clean energy investments that the 120 national electricity taxpayer households, just from eliminating the tech neutral by fiscal year 4045 production tax credits and the 48E investment tax credit. In some states, households' energy bills could rise over $500 annually. And by 2040, American households could face $140 to $220 higher energy bills each year if Congress repeals the tech neutral tax credits. Now, we know that Donald Trump promised to cut energy costs in half, but he's really taken a series of executive orders that have driven prices higher. Now his Republican allies in Congress are crafting they're talking about it right now, a reconciliation bill package that would wipe out the Inflation Reduction Act clean energy investments altogether to fund their $4.5 trillion tax giveaway to billionaires and big corporations. This is what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about the rocky road for white middle class America and for low and moderate income communities and communities of color. There's no road at all. Now, innovation, federal clean energy tax credits make every energy more affordable. Now, there was a data analysis that was done, study which was done. The summary compares the analysis from more than a dozen nonpartisan research groups showing how repealing the 45 fiscal year and 45E technology neutral electricity tax credits would raise the nation's household energy bills around $6 billion annually in the next 5 years and $25 billion annually by 2040. In some states, households could shoulder as much as a $500 increase in their annual energy bills. The United States electricity demand is expected to grow in part because of data centers. Demand could more than double by 2030. Utilities need to build more plants quickly to meet the increased demand. This comes at the time when paying electricity is an increasing larger burden for American families and businesses. Costs increased at 22% from 2018 to 2023 and could rise another 7% this year. To meet the growing demand, utilities are largely turning to renewables as the fastest, most affordable way to bring more power online. Well, the problem we are having in 13 states, ladies and gentlemen, which is regulated by an organization called the PJM, is that they have the worst track record of any major regulatory entity. Now, the PJM controls 13 states, starting with parts of North Carolina, Virginia, the District of Columbia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New York, parts of Illinois, and Ohio. And just recently, had it not been for Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania filing a lawsuit last December at the Federal Regulatory Commission here in Washington, D.C., and getting a resounding victory. And that particular lawsuit was joined by the 13 U.S. attorneys' offices and governors from those adjoining states that are a part of the PJM market demographics. This market demographics, as we know it, as the PJM, is comprised of these market areas. Now, they control the regulation of the cost of energy, the price of energy, what types of energy that can be used in those market demographics. And the market comprises 20% of the US population with 65 million consumers of electricity, customers in those market demographics. And that rate increase was an 800% increase for natural gas. And as I've indicated, had it not been for the lawsuit here at the brought by Governor Superior of Pennsylvania, we would have gotten hit with a $21 billion rate hike in the PJM region. So you can add that to the information that I'm providing for you at this time, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let's go on and drill down further. Long-standing tax credits extended by Congress in 22 reduced the cost of meeting growing electricity demand and provided utilities with important incentives to diversity American energy. Two specific credits by fiscal year 45, 2045, and the 48E technology neutral tax credits for clean energy production are protecting consumers by getting new renewables on the grid quickly and reducing the costs. Unfortunately, Congress is now considering repealing the credits. This would force higher prices on households and businesses already dealing with electricity increases. Now, we have to sort of look at the smoke and mirrors, ladies and gentlemen, what is going on. You did hear me use the term data centers. One data center can use as much energy as it needs to power 1 million homes. And when you start talking about building a data center in the state of Maryland, which is one that has been proposed to be built here, where in my physical home county of Prince George's County, Maryland, we're talking about major rate hikes hitting Maryland residents because those costs will be passed on to us. And one of the things that we have to be concerned about is looking at the other things that are happening in the marketplace as thousands of federal workers are being terminated from their jobs, which we will touch on later on in this broadcast. But as we begin to go ahead and look at the other impacts of that the federal clean energy tax credits have already lowered electricity prices. NORA, the neutral tax credits, have found that U.S. residents' electricity prices would be 6.7% higher in 2026 and 7.3% higher in 2029, and an obscene absence of the tax credits. Consumers in some states would stunned by a particular strong cost of increase without credits. Household would see in their fiscal year 2026 electric bills increase by 21% in Washington, D.C., and a 14% increase in North Carolina. Other analysis shows similar impacts from the FY 45 and the 48E repeal. Energy Innovation Fund, and we're looking at the repeal would increase annual household bills up to $640 in the state of Missouri, $520 in the state of Arkansas, $480 in Kansas, $460 in Idaho, $460 in Rhode Island, and $400 in Texas. Aero Energy Research finds annual energy increases up to $490 in New York, $420 in Texas, $410 in Minnesota, and it goes on, and the article it breaks out all 50 states and the impact that you will be able to find this information, ladies and gentlemen, on our website. And you want to check out the release that talks about the Trump energy hikes and how they will be impacting Trump's energy price hikes. Families could pay $120 more for electricity if the GOP pulls the plug on clean energy. Now, we want to sort of bring this closer to home, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to look at several of the things that are happening here in the marketplace as it relates to renewable energy in the DMV market area. Now, the Office of the People's Counsel here in Washington, D.C. puts out a monthly news article, online news blog, and it said urgent water bill alert, help for federal workers, leaky pipes, and more. And this is in their online OPC connection, Office of People's Council's connection. But one thing, ladies and gentlemen, that's very, very concerning to me as we look at what's going on with this specific article, and there is a note from Mrs. Sandra Mathers Fry, who serves as the lead counsel for the Office of the People's Counsel. Now, as the spring season gets underway, the Office of the People's Counsel is moving aggressively to assist DC consumers who are navigating challenges with utility bills, where you or someone you may know recently impacted by federal layoffs. The question, are you someone who currently experience economic setbacks? If so, it says rest assured, the Office of the People's Counsels, Water, and the legislative services are here to assist DC residents. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's a great gesture. And I know that Mrs. Fry is doing what she can, and her staff from the Office of People's Counsel in Washington, D.C. I happen to be a close friend of Mrs. Fry. So and her husband was a very dear friend of mine for a number of years. Now, it went on to say, with electricity, gas, or water rates rising, job losses climbing, utility rates. Recently, the District Department of Energy and Environment informed the Office of the People's Counsel that it stopped accepting applications for low and moderate income assistance programs. That's the LEAP program, ladies and gentlemen, on March 7th of 2025, and does not anticipate reopening the application process until the new fiscal year of October of 2025. So we're talking about people are not able to get any assistance. Last year, Mayor Bowser pull the entire budget for the pilot program, which was launched here in Washington, D.C., known as the Solar for All program. Yours truly, I spent a number of hours at various hearings. I testified in front of the DC Council, advocating for funding for this pilot program to be picked up by the Biden and Harris administration, and it was finally adopted. And $7 billion was put into that fund. On last year of April was Earth Day the 22nd, 2024, EPA announced the 60 recipients of that $7 billion, which the District of Columbia was slated to receive $62 million of that funding. Well, we know that the Trump administration froze that funding, even though a federal judge has issued an order after the Trump administration was sued by 23 U.S. attorneys in 23 states requesting that this money be released for that particular initiative that came under the Greenhouse Gas Initiative under EPA's auspices. Now, the former head of the EPA under the Biden-Harris administration was the first African American to hold that post, Mr. Michael Regan. And with his vision and foresight, looking at the timeline that the Biden-Harris administration had to develop these programs through going through the legislative process, actually the physical design of those programs through the offices of energy justice programs, which were known as EJE offices. Those offices designed, put those programs together and put those grant applications and put those processes into motion. And the funding for the first phase of that money came on the timeline when the Biden-Harris administration was in a lame duck status. So Michael Regan parked $20 billion of the $27 billion under the Citicorp Bank in their deposited in the name of those grantees to fund various renewable energy projects. But the $7 billion for the Solar for All program was still left in the coffers of EPA, which Zealand, who is now has EPA, has indicated he was not going to release the funding, and he didn't really care what the federal judge's order says. And this is an issue that, as we know, is ongoing, and it will probably end up going in front of the Supreme Court because companies cannot plan with uncertainty. These are things that are impacting low and moderate income communities. And here in the state of Maryland, if you go to the Maryland Clean Energy Administration and look at the funding, which Maryland was slated to receive some $62 million, and the Maryland Clean Energy Center, which serves as the green bank for the entire state. We have 22 counties in the state of Maryland. I was informed through a very, very reliable source that they were waiting on $137 million, which has been frozen. So this is creating all types of confusions and havoc in the marketplace. Now, let's look at the other side of this, ladies and gentlemen, as we're talking about people who are being impacted by this. Now, the Office of the People's Counsel here in the District of Columbia, getting back to DC, indicated recently, as I indicated, on March the 7th, 2025, that DOEE was not accepting any more applications for people who needed energy assistance. In October 2025, we recognized that many consumers rely on this program to help pay utility bills, and that program's closure is of concern, but other payment options are available. Well, the issue for Maryland residents is quite different from that of the District of Columbia. I would give the former director of the Department of Energy and Environment in Washington, D.C., his kudos, Tommy Wells, who was the director of DOEE in the inception of the Solar for All program, that they adopted the federal energy eligibility requirements for people to be able to apply for help, which starts at, for one person, $53,000 a year, which breaks down to $4,746 on a monthly basis. Ladies and gentlemen, if you cross the line into my home state of Maryland and look at the need for help through the energy assistance programs, if you need to pay your electricity bill in the state in Prince George's County, and you go out to the offices on Bright Seat Road, they look at the last 30 days. And anyone who's who has made over $15 an hour, which breaks out to $30,000 a year, that is $2,510. You can't get any help. Well, you can't live in a tree house in the state of Maryland for that, in Prince George's County. And when you look at the income eligibility cap as it relates to Montgomery County, which is the number one county in terms of wealth and area median income in the state of Maryland, it's lower than it is in Prince George's County. So the local politicians, from the city council to the state delegates and representatives, completely have dropped the ball. Yours truly, I monitor every Friday morning the legislation that have been bills that have been introduced. And I've had this discussion with Augustine, who is my state senator, with my state delegate, Ms. Dana Tarvez. To no one's credit has anyone introduced any legislation to deal with raising the eligibility cap to something that makes sense. So federal workers who are being laid off work. The state of Maryland has 150,000 federal employees, and many of them are being impacted by these federal cutbacks at these federal agencies. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I've had the privilege of bringing these issues up in front of my Congressman, Glenn Ivey. We've written letters. We've sent responses of letters concerning this issue. and other issues that are very, very concerning to me when I look at the fact that the damage that has been done by the Trump administration in signing these executive orders, rescinding Executive Order 14096. Once again, that created the Invest in America agenda, which was Build Back Better, and the Inflation Reduction Act 13985, which was the executive order, which created diversity, equity, and inclusion across all 6 federal agencies, and it brought into prominence the Justice 40 initiative, where 40% of that $1.7 trillion had to be directed at low and moderate income residents nationwide. Now, as we look at one of the initiatives which under the Inflation Reduction Act, which we talked about, the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, the $7 billion which went out to 60 entities across the U.S. was to impact 900,000 low and moderate income residents. But when we begin to look down and drill down on these programs, we're seeing that you have a 15% override by most of these organizations that are receiving this funding. And when you begin to look at the breakdowns, for example, here in Maryland, it was $7.2 million to be used for administrative overhead. But when you looked at the total number of installs over the 5 years from the 62 million, you were only talking about 1,303 units for rooftop solar. Now, it went on and it gives you a breakdown. You can go to their website, the Maryland Clean Energy Center, and you'll be able to get the breakdown on what they are providing and what they're offering. And we'll be able to give you a little more detail as we pull that information here up on the platform today. But we want to still look at several of the articles as we talk about the actual impact this is going to have on African American communities. And in doing so, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to refer to an article which you can find on our news and events tab here on Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And it talks about the war in the Trump's war on federal workers. Black families pay a higher price. And this specific article gives you a better breakdown on the impact it's going to have on the African American and other communities of color as it relates to the makeup of the federal workforce. U.S. Department of Education headquarters building located here in Washington, D.C. This was an article which was written, and we always try to give credit to those journalists who write these articles. This specific article was done by Derek Muhammad and Tyler Mitchell, and it was published on March 28th, 2024 in the online Word in Black online blog and news journal that you can find online. That's Word in Black. Now, this specific article went on to talk about, once again, the Department of Education headquarters building here in Washington, D.C. on March 24, 2025. U.S. President Donald Trump signed an order on March 20th aimed at eliminating the Department of Education, a decade-old goal of the American right, which wants individual states to run schools free from federal government. Well, that's a joke that's not funny. And the reason why the joke is not funny, I hail originally from South Carolina, which is is my home state where I was born and raised. And I lived through that segregated Jim Crow era. And we know that our fight in this country was not so much to be in the set in the same room with white kids. It was because the funding was separate and unequal, and we paying those taxes, and we're not getting the same investment for African American youth in this country. And if you're talking about leveling the playing field, you have to talk about how you're funding education. Bottom line, I'm a former educator here in the state of Maryland, which I spent most of my time working in the DC public school systems as a physical education instructor. I'm an alumnus of Morgan State. At that time, it was college. It's now university. I had a dual major, recreation administration and physical education. And we spent 15 years in DC public school systems teaching physical education. So I know a little something about education because my mother spent 40 years as an English teacher in the state of South Carolina and became the first speech therapist licensed in the state. And she received her master's degree from Columbia University in 1950, a year before I was born. So I can go back and give you some real history as it relates to the impact of education as it relates to families and young people. So when I began to look at where we are today and look at you talking about dismantling the Department of Education, within weeks, the Trump administration has ousted dozens of career officials, undone decades of policy aimed at removing the barriers for Black inclusion and signal a return to a partisan rather than merit-based system. The recent wave of federal firings and policy shifts under the Trump administration represents the dismantling of government policy and the practice that has led to private sector opportunities for African Americans. Much of the private sector still lags greatly behind the government, the largest employer in the economy, and including African American levels up in the workplace. Now, when we begin to look at what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about looking at what percentage of African Americans is were employed. As the Center for American Progress reports, Black workers in the private sector have only about 10% of the wealth of white workers, but Black workers in the public sector have almost half the work of white workers. So we're still doing the work, getting paid less for doing the same jobs, but Black workers in the public sector have almost half the work of that of white workers. The racial changes in government policy proposed by the Department of Government Efficiency, can we say DOS and Elon Musk, threatens the progress found in the public sector and threatens to erase the public sector as an opportunity for greater African American economic security. Yet these numbers only scratch the surface of the personal impact of these jobs have on real lives, as college seniors preparing to graduate this spring, I've watched this growing alarm as classmates consider whether career paths. Many of us grew up watching our parents and grandparents build careers in the federal services, whether it was the U.S. Postal, where Black employees employ 27% of the workforce, and in other federal agencies. The U.S. government has historically led the way for providing workforce opportunities for Black Americans. The military and government sector more broadly has offered set standards for racial progress than the private sector took decades to approach. For example, President Truman in 1948 produced two executive orders that would shift employment practice nationwide for the following generations. Ladies and gentlemen, we're looking at a precipice here in this country as it relates to energy. As we look at the white middle class, it is a rocky road ahead. But for Black and brown communities of color, there's no road at all. Because if you don't have a job of employment, I don't care what kind of programs you're talking about, you still have to be able to show that you can afford the cost to, if you want to purchase or finance a PV system that goes on one's roof to offset the high energy costs here in the marketplace, you still have to come up with the funding in order to be able to do what? Afford that system. And when you begin to look at the companies that are being charged with these uh, and with the issue of doing these installs, there's a great deal of uncertainty as relates to the interest rates and various programs. And even when you look at the private sector and their investment, I'm going to be placing a call to a member of the board of directors for the National Association of Blacks in Solar, which yours truly, I'm presently the chairman of the board of directors. And when I spoke with Mr. Henderson, and you can get more information on his organization by logging on to our website and just clicking on our affiliate marketplace in our headliner on our website, and you can look for Imbalance 2030, and you will see the various financing programs that his company does. That is his arena. That is what he does for a living. So when I come on these airways and I'm talking about CDFIs, which are community investment corporations that have been charged with receiving the funding from a number of these grant programs, because this was the mechanism that the Biden and Harris administration had come up with to get the funding out the door. And the funding has been frozen. Now, when we begin to drill down and look at all entities and concerns, we are looking at some very, very, very important concerns, more than legitimate concerns, when you mesh that with the impact of laying off thousands of employees across the country. You look at the hard push to raise today, April the 2nd, 4 p.m., 2025, the person who I refer to as COVID 45 plus 2 with 34 felony counts looking straight at you will be announcing these tariffs and saying to the American public, there's going to be some pain. Well, it won't be pain for Elon Musk, who has over $400 billion in federal contracts through NASA and the corporations. This is all about giving the tax breaks to the billionaire class. And we know who those individuals are. If you saw the inauguration, you saw who was sitting behind Donald Trump at the inauguration. They were all billionaires. And it's very, very clear that this is a tax credit for them. And for the masses who are caught up in the matrix, working class white folks, middle class white folks, you are caught in the matrix when you begin to look at your IRA. Now, what does this have to do with energy? Well, if you recall, Trump called all of the fossil fuel entities to the table and indicated you can put $1 billion in my campaign and you can do what you want to do. Well, this is coming to fruition, ladies and gentlemen, right in front of you. I don't have to make anything up. I can back it up with facts and data. Now, as we begin to look at organizations having a number of meetings and conferences, it's very, very interesting to me, ladies and gentlemen, how people go about their business of conducting business. I'm going to give you some very clear examples of what I'm talking about here today on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Now, as we know, many of you have seen us on YouTube in our channel. And you know that we are also recording this Zoom link or this show, which will be produced into a podcast. But I'm going to sort of give you an idea of some of the things that are happening, which puts information out of the reach of many of us who are even out here trying to report this information and bring this data to you on a weekly basis. Now, Inside Climate News, which is an online portal, it talks about a number of issues, and you'll be able to go to our news and events tab and click on the link, and you'll see them asking, keep environmental journalism alive, as they are attempting to bring you up-to-date articles. One of these articles that talks about Texas lawmakers are considering a bill for the state's nuclear power industry through a taxpayer-funded incentive program. Now, most of you are familiar with it's called NOAA. And this organization is located very near me. And we know it as the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. NOAA, although battered by the Trump administration's attempts to impose massive staff and budget cuts on the agency, nevertheless continues to publish critical climate information, including some dire drought warnings in the spring, Outlook published, this was just published on March 20th, Climate Prediction Center. This is put out through NOAA. Now, if you click on the link, once again, experts say attempt for massive firing at NOAA workers may be illegal and threaten public safety. Weather forecasters, climate modelers, scientists, crew members, and research ships received termination emails while a federal judge simultaneously ordered the Trump administration to rescind the firing orders. This is dated February the 28th, 2025. You'll be able to find this information under our news and events tabs. Supervisors began carrying out potential illegal orders to terminate many probationary workers at the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration on Thursday. Now, what's important about this, ladies and gentlemen, if you're following the weather, and I hope that you are, you know that this is spring, and we are in a shift in the atmosphere and the climate. And as the warm weather and cold weather clashes, they create atmospheric turbulence. We get massive thunderstorms, which drops tons of water that creates floods, tornadoes, hurricanes. Well, without NOAA, people have no idea what they're faced with on a day-to-day basis. Less than 2 weeks ago, there was a breakout of F1s, F2s, F3s, and I think one F4 was reported. You had 42 deaths, ladies and gentlemen, across the heartland of this country. People gone, homes gone, properties destroyed. But yet we got somebody cutting the funding for NOAA? Come on. Now, people are up in arms. We know this. But I have to agree with my brother, Roland Martin. Don't blame me. I voted for the black woman. We had options. We didn't have to be here. But now that we're here, everybody is coming up with Democrats, Republicans. Senator Cory Booker just did a 25-hour filibuster on the U.S. Senate floor, which you can go on any source and listen to it, talking about all of these improprieties that the Trump administration is bringing down on all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, the renewable energy sector is in serious jeopardy in this country. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I hope that we brought you news that you can definitely use here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future with Black America. And as we close out with our new music thing, I'm hoping that it's being picked up, as we will be closing out with Mr. Magic, 1975, by one of my favorite artists, Grover Washington, as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And ladies and gentlemen, please understand, we can't bring you this show and not ask you to kick in a little dough. So if you go to our GoFundMe link, you'll find that we're trying to raise around 68K. We are not the greedy, but we are definitely the needy here on this platform. solar now and the future with its economic impact on Black America. So whatever you're able to contribute, we would greatly appreciate it. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we don't want you to meet us here. We want you to beat us back here as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now. And we close out with music from Grover Washington, Mr. Madden.